liberty-loving friends. This is another fantastic episode of Good Morning Liberty. My name is Nate Thurston. I am the co-host. Charlie is not here. It's just me today, except for this guy I've got via Zoom, who you might have seen floating around because he did an amazing job in these recent debates. I've got Mr. Michael the Beard White running for U.S. Congress in Arkansas' 2nd District. How's it going today?
Man, Nate, it's great, man. Glad to be here with you, brother.
So just as a backstory for everyone, we may or may not have met because I made a comment on the video questioning this Beardgate problem. I wasn't the only one that brought it up. I told my wife about this last night. I was like, yeah, I'm talking to this guy. I kind of started off by, I don't know, somewhat insulting his beard a little bit. And she was like, babe, those are real people on the internet. You got to apologize. So listen, it really was the fact that I am envious of what you've got going on. I've never been able to quite reach that level, but I'm trying. I mean, I joined the Beard Club and I'm trying to grow right now. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking now.
We could put the rumors to rest. It was kind of funny, honestly. 95% of people seem to not care, right? And there are 5% of people, and I've received tons of messages. Half are like, "Hey, do you dye your beard?" And I say, "Yes, I do." And they go, "It looks awesome." And then half are like, "Do you dye your beard?" And I say, "Yes." And they, "You shouldn't do that." And so my common response to those messages are, show me on the doll where the beard dye touched you.
That's good. There's no rules. There's no rules saying that you can't. I mean, totally.
I didn't think I violated the NAP. I mean, it's my hair. I mean,
yes.
Tell me how bad it hurts. Yeah.
Individual rights. That's what you're standing up for right now. But just you're talking about putting the rumors to rest and everything. I mean, just get like a little tug on that thing. Let's make sure it's not like strapped back behind your.
It's real, man. It's there.
Okay.
And also the color is called real black. So I know it's real then too. So
it's real. Listen,
it's real, man.
I want to confirm to everyone listening, if you're not watching the video, which you should on YouTube, he did in fact pull on his beard. It was a real pull. It did not come off. This is in fact a real beard. So Beardgate finished. It was fake news. It was fake news.
It's fake news. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So give everyone your backstory. How did you get to where you are right now and why you're running for office? Of course, we always got to go with the how long have you been a libertarian, what made you a libertarian, all that stuff. Let everyone know.
Sure, man. So I guess that's kind of two questions, but let's tackle the first one first, my background. I'm originally from Louisiana. I was in business, in the telecom business for about a better part of a decade, 2 years, 12 years, something like that. Sold a company in 2016. I had vacation property here in Arkansas for many, many years. I love Arkansas. It's my favorite place in the world. Always wanted to live here. My wife had an opportunity to relocate here for a position. So we came here. And the kind of the impetus for running for office, I think, is similar to what a lot of the candidates that we're kind of putting on the ballot right now are, which is just how bad things got, right? I think at some point in time in the past 2 years with the whole cerveza sickness issue going on. I'm going to try to not use some words to keep the algos from suppressing us, right?
Thank you. We appreciate it. Yep.
So with that whole thing going on, at some point in time, you sit there, you're watching the television, you're talking to yourself, you're talking to your friends, you're talking to your family, and you just want to stop complaining and start doing something. And 2 years ago, Ricky Dale Harrington here in Arkansas, who's running for governor, he ran against Tom Cotton, a senator here, in just a two-way race, and kind of got a lot of media attention because of that. And when this election cycle came around, the Libertarian Party of Arkansas kind of put out a call to action, said, "Hey, come run with Ricky. We're fighting for ballot access. We got the state legislature. We sued them. And if we get 3% of the vote, we can maintain that ballot access. So let's stack the ballot with candidates, kind of increase our messaging everywhere. And if you can help, come help." Right. And so that's kind of how that whole thing started, really. And it's, again, been an honor and a privilege to be doing that. But as far as being a libertarian, I would say that my red pill moment was probably somewhere around 2006. There was a film you might remember, Aaron Russo's From Freedom to Fascism. You may be familiar with it. Other people may. I remember watching that film going, man, I've known that things are dysfunctional. I've known that things are not working right. I'm about 24 years old at the time. And that really kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of investigating, my own government, my own political beliefs. I was part of the 9/11 generation. I was 19 years old when that event happened. It was my generation, my friends who got shipped off to those, unjust conflicts. Many came back, some didn't. The ones that did all came back with either scars, seen or unseen. And that really kind of progressed my journey. And then, of course, you have the Ron Paul era and everything else. And so, that's kind of when I became a libertarian, as I started realizing that most of the things that divide people today, they're divided about because the government has power over them. And if they didn't, they really wouldn't care about much of these things. And that's where I am and kind of how I got here, man.
Yeah, totally agree on that. It all has to do with, we say all the time that everyone's fighting over a gun. The government's a gun. We're all afraid of what the other person might do if they get a hold of it. And if we didn't have that gun right there in the middle, then we wouldn't hate each other quite as much. We're just scared of what the other guy's going to do when he gets it.
You're 100% correct. And one thing I've kind of messaged to voters is that, we make a better America by removing the unjust powers from government, not by fighting over who gets to have them. And that's what we've become as the political machine in this country. I mean, it's kind of always been that way, I guess, for a long time. But you could argue that has really increased in rapidity and voraciousness over the past 20 years. And so I think that's the way that we solve so many of these issues. Is we have to get that out of government, get those unjust powers away, not just keep handing the cattle prod off to another side.
Now, Republicans talk a lot about how they want to decrease the size and the scope of government. And I'm sure that your opponent in the race, I mean, if he gets in, he's going to reduce the power of government, right?
Yeah, they talk about it all the time. They love it as a talking point. They don't seem to actually want to do it. This is a very red state. And so a number of voters I talked to have voted Republican pretty much their whole life. And when I have to remind them of the fact that, it's not the Democrats' fault necessarily that things are the way they are, I have to point out that, hey, over the past, 2 decades, Republicans had an unopposed government for 9 years. They still managed to run a deficit, still grew the size of the government, passed red flag gun laws against veterans, renewed the Patriot Act, unjust spying on American citizens. They kind of get this glaze over their eyes where they're like, I never really thought about it like that. And that's, again, what this is about, is we have to carry that message to people and let them know, hey, you probably as a voter only pay attention to these things once every 2 to 4 years. And you hear these talking points and you just accept them. Let me tell you the real story. Let me pull the curtain behind and show you what's really going on in Oz,
Now, your Democratic opponent, I saw the district that you're in. I was doing some research on it. Still a Republican district, but the most Democratic of the districts, right? Because you've got Little Rock in your district, right? So you do have a big city.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, you could argue that Northwest Arkansas might this election lean a little more Democratic because of Fayetteville and Eureka Springs and some places up there. But yeah, I mean, for most part, this is probably the most Democratic district in the state. Yeah.
Oh, where we would agree a lot with Democrats are things like criminal justice reform. They talk a lot about that. I mean, when Democrats have power, they pass massive criminal justice reform packages, right?
Yeah, I mean, that 94 crime bill just was such a great thing for the criminal justice system and reforming it. Made it so much more fair and just and let so many people out of prison. I mean, exactly the same thing. And again, most, we're here in Little Rock, so you got to remember that a lot of voters are Clinton era Democrat voters. Okay. I guess you call them yellow dog Democrats, whatever. And so they sort of have an idea in their head of what they think the Democrat Party is supposed to be. And so they're very apt to listen to the message because somewhere deep inside them, they know that the party has left them a long time ago and has moved their messaging and their focus away from, hey, we're going to try to be for the working man. We're going to try to be for balance of power, meaningful social reforms, to let's just be woke and get everybody mad about everything. And that's what we're going to do. And so, again, that's been really beneficial in the conversations I've had with voters when I get the chance to talk to voters.
Now, how often do you hear that you're going to spoil this election and steal votes from either one of those? You're going to ruin the election for both of those people, is what you would hear from both of those sides. Where do you come down on that issue? I'll admit, first off, I've been sympathetic to the argument before in that, things are getting so bad that I will admit, I will say, man, I don't like Republicans either, but Gosh, dang it. I don't want that Democrat to get in the office because good Lord, if maybe we've reached the point of the lesser of two evils is still the best evil that we can find. Where do you come down on that conversation?
I mean, the only way that I can come down on it is so there's a local radio show that has me on at least a few times, and they're pretty good about putting me on air. But kind of when I'm off the air, every now and then that topic gets brought up that I might quote unquote spoil an election. And I try to remind people, hey, if the Republican dropped out of the race tomorrow, we would win this thing in a landslide. It wouldn't even be tight. So who's really spoiling the election, in my opinion? Who's really spoiling it? Is it me that actually stands for these principles and wants to actually enact them, the things you really believe in? Or is it the person who keeps claiming for now 4 terms and now going to be a 5th term that they believe in and never has done so? And again, that's all you can really say, because people are going to, this system has been so deeply ingrained in the American ethos of it's this versus this, and it's going to take time, messaging, and slowly but surely, I believe we're going to change that to where people realize, hey, a third voice really makes sense. I was in an event and I was asked a question, or a question was posited, like, could I expect to do as just one libertarian in Congress, one of 435 voices? What can you really do? And I made the point that, hey, most significant legislation in this country comes down to a 51-49 split, super, super tight. We're talking about a handful of votes, 2 or 3 votes. All of a sudden, if you have a single voice that's different, Arkansas Central District becomes very strategically important, right? What are they going to do that's going to benefit Liberty? What are they going to do that's going to benefit us? And that's been another good messaging. And I would hope that maybe some of the national candidates can kind of carry that too, because you really do see the lights come on in people's head and they go, oh, wow, you're right. Like, that does make sense. We really only have 2 seats really in Congress. So even if you're just one of 435, you're still now one of 3, and it changes the dynamic,
It's also, once you get that one in there, it opens the door for that people to see that and like, oh, this is possible. This can happen. I think you get one elected. I know Amash switched over to Libertarian while he was already in there. You get that one elected in the Congress. I think I really think you get the ball rolling once people see that that's a possibility. So yeah. I really hope that it happens.
Well, I mean, again, my Vegas odds aren't probably pretty good, and that's okay. I view this the same way a lot of federal candidates and other people view it. And I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for Libertarian Party of Arkansas, and I certainly can't speak for LP National, so I'm not doing that. But what I kind of see is that we kind of win from the ground up. Local offices, we start with city council, start occupying those seats, quorum courts and things like that. Your school boards, local elections. That kind of gets the idea going. Then you have some state reps, state senators, your treasurers, your things like that. And before you know it, we're kind of building up, and then all of a sudden 1 or 2 federal seats. And I think it could possibly be accomplished in 3 or 4 election cycles. I really do believe that's possible.
So I was going to say, I went through your website earlier, and once again, compliments on that, because you've got not just ideas out there, you've got actual policy proposals out there on your website. I mean, it's not like Elizabeth Warren level policy proposals out there where you got like every single thing down to the decimal point, but that's okay because that's boring. But you do have policy proposals, and I might add, it's not what you would expect a libertarian to be throwing out there for policy proposals, like tax reform in taxation, inflation in the Fed, all that. That's because I don't know where you come down on stuff like that, but I actually liked that your website wasn't all about all that stuff, because let's face it, it's not practical right now.
Yeah, and so I don't know if I've coined the term or I've started to popularize the term, at least here in Arkansas, but I believe in this concept of incrementalism. We're not going to take people in the matrix and then say, hey, you vote for me and I'm going to end everything that you've ever assumed to be part of reality. Now, would like to do that? Would I like to do the Morpheus moment and bring you out of it and show you what what I believe we could have? Absolutely. But we have to slowly wake these people up and slowly begin to unwind these things. So do I want to end the IRS? Would love to. But how about we start with some meaningful tax reforms and simplifying the tax code? How about that? Right? Would I love to have a world with open borders and free trade? Absolutely would. but let's find some common sense ways to fund our federal programs, make things safer, respect the decency of these people, those kind of things. And when you talk about that with people, they realize, okay, this isn't the same sort of libertarian talking points we've gotten before. So I thank you for the compliment. I worked very hard on those. And again, some have been stolen from other people. It wasn't like I just wrote them all myself, but thanks for that, man. I appreciate that.
You mentioned immigration there for a minute. So I wanted to tell you, I think you and I align on this pretty well. I philosophically am open borders. I also think that it would be useful to know if someone who's on the run for murdering his family is trying to get across the border and come into the U.S. I think that that's a useful piece of information. And
not a bad piece to have, right?
No. Yeah. And so all I really want is a system. You put the name into the system. Okay, this government, they're not on the run because they murdered their family. Cool. See you later. Welcome. Here's your gift bag. And
right.
So where do you come down on that? I think I read something similar to that without the gift bag, because you might have to use taxpayer money to pay for the gift bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's kind of moral hazards on all of it, right? I mean, like if we talk about, a fair immigration system, I really think balances kind of three principles in my platform. We respect the decency of these people. We understand it's a legitimate human rights crisis. Like, don't forget that these people are human beings. They're occupying the same rock floating through space that you are. The second thing is I don't believe that our immigration system should cost Americans anything. I believe in free markets, and I think that America is one of the best products on the planet. And so I believe the demand for that will pay for those things, right? And the third thing is part of this issue is kind of systemic and tied into criminal justice, tied into the war on drugs. If we were to undercut these revenue streams of narco-terrorism and human trafficking, and we had people, we were able to get that eliminated, we can make a fairer, more balanced system that makes that happen. I interviewed an ICE agent when I was writing that policy, and I said, hey, man, I turn on the news and they say, hey, these people are being smuggled in. What are they paying to be smuggled into this country? And he goes, man, it's between $5,000 to $15,000. We've intercepted people that were paying $30,000. And he said that the sad thing is that the ones who pay the most, when they get here, they sometimes get held hostage because the people know they have money, and then call back to the family and say, hey, we got your brother-in-law here. He already paid us 30. If you want us to let him go, get us another 10. So I think about that from a business perspective as we can undercut that revenue. So a pay to enter, pay to stay program, I think makes a lot of sense. Simplify it, say, hey, you want to come here? Here's, whatever that fee is, let's let the market kind of figure out what it's going to be. Pay us. We're going to document you because we kind of have to. I know there's some moral hazard with that too, big data stuff like that. We're going to streamline your citizenship. You're going to pay for this process. You're going to help fund our agencies. And while we're doing that, we're unwinding this war on drugs, undercutting narco-terrorist profits, I believe. Again, I would like to see free, markets, but I think that initially legal, regulated drug markets are probably a better transition. So we can kind of tackle those things. And so I might have been a little long-winded in that answer, but it's not a simple, direct thing that you can say. I can't just say, let's build a wall, right? And unfortunately, the electorate, and a lot of times, wants those simple answers, right? They just want you to say, hey, let's build a wall. It's not going to work. It's not that simple. And so, again, it's a system of issues. But yeah, I'm talking too much, man. I'm handing it back to you, brother.
And sometimes the thing that, like, as libertarians, we tend to be a little bit better off is finding the source of the problem. So you're talking about the drug war. You're talking about what are the incentives that are causing a lot of the problems that we have. So, like on the drug war, as a libertarian, your perfect society is everyone being high on heroin all the time. Right?
Yeah, apparently to some people, that's their opinion. Yeah. Yeah.
No, what would you, you said something about legal, regulated drug market, stuff like that. So, it's for the people who assume that you want my siblings to go to Walmart and buy some heroin starting right after the election. Where do you come down on that?
Man, I have a lot of good favorite Ron Paul quotes, but one of my favorite ones was from a debater, an issue one time where he said, if heroin was legalized tomorrow, how many of you would go start doing heroin? Right. And I'm of the belief that, prohibition doesn't end anything. It just ends legal markets to things. You still have the things going on, and you nailed it on the head about identifying the source of the problem and the ingredients that are causing the issue. So we have these two, agencies right now. We have the Department of Health and Human Services, and we have the DEA. We have people employed by them. We have budgets assigned to them, and they have certain tasks that they're focused on. I believe a good transition to get these, again, get the illegal drug trade out of business and begin to kind of take addiction and this opiate crisis, again, caused by co-opting between large pharmaceutical companies and government, is that we kind of refocus those roles to, again, legal regulated drug markets. And we already have the distribution points for those. They're called doctor's offices. They're called healthcare facilities. They already exist out there. It's just a matter of, again, kind of dismantling that CSA, kind of refocusing our roles in the personnel. And I think within 2 to 3 years, we could have a lot of that under control, and we could probably have 98, 99% of addiction kind of dealt with. And then maybe we can regroup and say, okay, now what do we want to do? But we've done this for 50 years. We've spent trillions of dollars. We've locked millions of people up. We have just as many drugs, more dangerous drugs than before. And I tell people all the time, hey, in legal regulated drug markets, you know what the dose is and you know what you're getting. And that to me is infinitely better than some kid in college who says, yeah, you know, I'm a little drunk. Maybe I'll have some of this with my buddy, and then he's dead, which is happening now all over the country, right? So that's my kind of take on it. Is it perfect? No, but I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to be a little bit better than where we are.
Yeah, for me, and this is me talking, not speaking for you. I want a brand name on the box. I want to know who's going to get sued if there's some kind of poison other than the intended poison that's in the box. If there's some kind of fentanyl in there that's going to kill someone, I want to know who's going to be liable for that. I want to know whose company is going to be destroyed when that happens. I think you put a brand name on the box and you take care of all the dangerous drugs that we have. I mean, you know what I mean by dangerous. I mean, alcohol is dangerous.
Absolutely.
Cigarettes are dangerous. But yeah, you know what I mean. The unintended danger.
Well, the issue with drugs always is dose. You know, the difference between a poison and a treatment is dose. You can take aspirin and kill yourself with it. So you bring up, again, a great point about, you know, culpability, responsibility, product labeling, things that we kind of take for granted that really the free market would do anyway without having to have the FDA involved in it. But, you know, we have a chance to get those quote unquote first time users and the people that are, you know, chronic users into a medical, you know, we have a medical interception of that. So a doctor doesn't have to say, hey, you know, you got to stop using fentanyl. A doctor can say, hey, I've noticed since your last visit 2 weeks ago, you know, you've increased the dose that you purchased. Would you like to talk about remediation issues? Would you like to talk about maybe possibly waning off this? Is this something you'd like to do? And I think you give those people that option because, you know, when you talk to people who are chronic addicts on some of this, you know, stuff and these issues, they don't want to be doing this. They don't want that, but they don't feel like they have any place they can go. And so they're pushed into this underground black market that has incredibly bad unintended consequences. And I believe, again, legal regulated markets are a little more transparent. And I think that we can handle some stuff like that, man.
Well, so shifting gears a little bit, I noticed a couple things on the site. So you mentioned at the top term limits, and then you also talk about there's this non-compete against America Act that I read into a little bit. And maybe we might disagree on a bit on this. I get the idea, but they seem like they're tackling symptoms of a much larger problem. And I'm sure you know that.
Sure.
But do you think they would help us towards tackling that larger problem?
So I've said it before, you know, I'm from the South originally, and you know, my grandmother would always say, if you don't want possums on the porch, you know, bring in the cat food, right? If you don't want the things there, you take away the incentives that cause them there. You've nailed this on the head already in this issue. I would like to ideally get the money and corruption out of politics, right? There's no magic wand for that. I don't believe that I can wave and make it happen. I do think that we have a fundamental issue and a significant moral hazard when members in Congress who sit on committees for finance, banking, regulation, appropriations are able to front run the American public for their own financial benefit, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where that non-compete against America Act comes from, which is, hey, this should be a position of service. You're going to divest to cash. Your husband's going to divest to cash. Your sons and your daughters are going to divest to cash. And as long as you're serving this country, that's what you're going to do. You're going to serve this country. And then for 3 years after you leave office, we're not going to let you do that. And I think we have a lot of people just say, hey, I don't even know if we need term limits, because they'd be like, there's no money here. You know, they wouldn't even show up. And so, and again, the term limit thing is maybe another backstop on that, but you're right. Like they're dealing with symptoms. They're not really dealing with root cause. Again, root cause is so big in this issue and really so complicated that I don't even know a way to deal with it, but dealing with symptom by symptom at the time, honestly.
Yeah. Maybe you can kind of choke it off at the incentive level a little bit there by preventing people from trading. Although Nancy Pelosi said that that's just the free market. So, which is ridiculous.
And again, it's common knowledge. She outtrades some of the best, quant algorithms on Wall Street. She's uncannily good as a trader. They should. I mean, Michael Burry from The Big Short has nothing on Nancy Pelosi.
Neither does Warren Buffett.
No, nothing.
No, those returns are amazing. I didn't realize how genius she was, but she seems to know what's going to happen before it happens. It's crazy. So
just a market genie.
It is.
Yeah.
So I think we are on the same page with that. You know what sucks about the term limits thing? Every time I think about it, I think, wow, really? So by the time I started paying attention to politics, you're telling me Ron Paul wouldn't have been able to be in office at that time? I would have never heard of the guy. And
that is a valid point, because what if the people want someone there for 20 years?
Yeah.
And they legitimately do. And so it's a valid point. Yes.
It's like, what if they're the best option? It's like saying, well, Amazon can only be the biggest online retailer for 4 years, and then we got to switch to something else,
Yeah.
It's, I don't know. But like you said, the problems are so big. The problem is that the government has control over the economy and over every single part of our lives. And that is the problem that needs solving. That's a really big problem. It's going to take a long time to roll back. Speaking of rolling stuff back, we talked about the IRS, the tax reforms. What are more common sense tax reforms with this incrementalist approach?
So, I mean, I had the pleasure of being able to take over some failing businesses in my previous business career. And it was always the same. There would be a book value for the company or the store, whatever I was acquiring. And there would be, this is how much we've been spending and this is how much we're taking in, and we're not making those numbers match, right? And the first thing we'd ever do would be, well, let me verify that, right? So this gentleman is saying these are the cost of his goods and inventory, this is the cost of his advertising, this is rent, insurance, yada, 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 whatever. And 9 times out of 10, we'd say, this person's overpaying for a commercial liability policy by 40% on the market. This person has not negotiated with their landlord for a better rent. This person has not negotiated with their vendors for bulk discounts and volume credits. And so that's kind of taken the cost basis out. I believe that that's triple blind forensic audits. We haven't had that of any federal spending. So before we even talk about the revenue side, which is taxes, let's talk about the spending side. Tell me the real number, because I don't trust the government to tell me that number at face value. There has never, and I mean never, and I'll challenge your listeners, everybody watching, just go on your Google machine and type in public audit fines. And the stories are infinite. Every time we audit some public agency or office, even on a local level, we find massive fraud, waste, and abuse. And I think on a federal level, we're going to find a ton of it. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if half the money that we're spending is going to like $2,000 toilet seats and $10,000 iPads.
Are you saying that we could get a coffee mug for less than $10K? I mean, what kind of
absolutely
thing are you selling here?
We could. Yeah. Okay. So that's the first thing. We talk a lot about taxes and revenue without talking about, and we talk about spending as if the number we're given is just a number. So that's part of it. So a triple blind forensic audit, we have three auditing agencies. None of them know who they are. We should get 3 exact answers that match or are pretty close, right? And that way we know. And so then we can deal with the revenue side of things, which is, okay, how do we make these numbers balance? Where's it coming from? What's going on? And again, I believe that number is going to come down quite a bit. But from a common sense perspective, part of kind of entitlement reform, for instance, Medicare, $1.5 trillion is the Medicare budget. $750 billion of it is administrative costs. I've looked into the org chart for Medicare. I've tried my best to figure out where that's going. I have a very difficult time understanding it. That's one thing. Again, this Ponzi scheme we call Social Security. Working class people right now, while preparing for retirement is important, and Social Security, in my opinion, is not retirement. Also, so is living. So I would like to see sort of annual raises of kind of a FICA floor. Where there's you're not paying anything into these programs up until a certain amount. And I think that's kind of how we start waning that side of the curve off of the inputs. And then, of course, dealing with the other side of unwinding on the outputs. I would like to see reforms for instant capital deductions for capital losses that are not being offset by capital gains. And the reason why I think so is because we have sort of a mixed messaging from our economic system. When the Federal Reserve causes these booms and bust cycles in the economy, and people lose a lot of money, whether it's on a home that they have to sell at a loss, or stocks that they have to liquidate at a loss, they're only able to take around $3,000 a year of those losses, right? And I think that having that to where a person says, "Hey, I lost $100,000 because you SOBs here, meddle with the economy," I'm writing all that off my taxes this year. So I'm a doctor. I made $100,000, but guess what? I lost $100,000 in the market because of this. Had to sell all this. I'm not paying you anything. I think that's a good check and balance. And again, it's simplifying the tax code in a way that is we're not walking through this legal minefield constantly. I'm dealing with it right now. I have an amended return from like 3 years ago that they still haven't processed. And they're still sending me letters saying, "Hey, you owe us this money." And I'm like, "Hold on, you got the return." So it's an unfair system that doesn't align itself with liberty. And again, I have a lot of tax reforms on there, but those are kind of the big three that I think make sense. And, it shouldn't be difficult for the American people to figure out what they quote unquote have to pay for extortion by the government. That shouldn't be difficult. Inputs are inputs, outputs are outputs. It should be really simple and easy. I kind of like the idea sometimes of a fair tax. I toss that around, but when the paradigm we're in and what we're going through, I think, again, simplifying it at first is probably the best step, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I like the fair tax the most also because it's the only one, consumption tax, right? That's
right.
It's the only one that you could possibly work your way out of it. You could eventually be self-sufficient and not need to worry about that tax. So that's the one that you could actually be able to get out of, and it is more voluntary, clearly, because you're just paying when you buy things. So, but we're nowhere near completely switching our tax system right now.
And you'll have so much opposition from, again, a very powerful, cabal exists to guarantee that they can, encumber the labor of future generations at the signing of Congresses today, right? So it's not going to be an easy fight. It sounds great. I would love to see even a voluntary consumption tax. Again, somewhat kind of like what Spike talks about with that voluntary transaction fee, where the market would say, "Hey, if you want participation in government and the protections of government, you can kind of pay this when you purchase something. If you don't have to." That's a great thing. I'd love to see that. But I think first we probably have to do that on local levels, see state governments do that for their taxes, and then prove to the American people in the public eye that we could do that on a federal level. A rabbit hole that people should really go down to, or they should go down is look at the propaganda of passing the 16th Amendment. Look at how the media of the time and the Congress of the time was trying to sell that to the American people. And you're like, man, they've been lying a long, long, long time,
Yep. That's always how it starts. It's always a 1% tax on the top 1%.
And it was just going to be maybe temporary. And just because we have tariffs and excises and we're trying to make your goods cost less money, and this is going to be good for you. And, it's really only going to be the big businesses that are going to pay it. Don't worry about it. You just give us this. And somewhere along the way, somebody forgot to put a limit on that amendment. Theoretically, we could wake up tomorrow and the government owns everything you and I have, has a mortgage on it, and that's completely 100% legal.
Yep. One of our friends, Anthony Davies, he tells a story about when they were debating this law or this amendment. Someone stood up concerned and said that if we do this, for all we know, within the next 5-10 years, the tax rate could be blank %. And I believe that number was 5.
Yeah.
And he got laughed out of the room, basically.
Like, we'll never do that.
It was crazy. That was a crazy conspiracy theorist.
And see, we go back to that concept of, again, that's a power issue to government that once it is an unjust one, and there's no restraints on it, and it's going to keep getting larger. Again, that 16th Amendment, I think, should be something studied by every civics class in America. How it came to be, how it's been implemented, how it's grown. And I think young people will be like, wow, this government really doesn't give a damn about me. Like, no, they don't.
No, you're right. They care about winning elections. That's right. That's what they care about. Okay, we're half an hour in, and we haven't talked about foreign policy, which is the whole video that I saw floating around the internet. And so we're in kind of a weird situation right now, deciding whether or not we're going to go into an all-out war with Russia because of another country that I didn't know. I want everyone to be safe and free and have their own country, but I didn't realize that I had signed up for that.
Right?
So
Yeah.
where do you come down on this mess that's happening? You're in Congress. What are you out there saying about Ukraine and Russia?
I mean, again, I think it's important that we understand, how we got here, how this came to be. This is not, again, what Putin is doing isn't great. And Zelensky's also, in my opinion, a war criminal. And I have reasons we can talk about that maybe off air for a while because it'll take a long time. But, we've been fomenting this crisis essentially through American funding of NATO since the day after the Soviet Union fell. It's like it falls in 91, and then we just start throwing them money. We're like, oh yeah, we're not going to expand NATO, but we're going to keep on doing it. And here we are now. And it's no coincidence, in my opinion, that the dust hadn't even settled on Kabul, and this was in the news, right? And the truth is that Ukraine has kind of been going through its own little civil war since 2014, 2015. And so, but now it's like we're picked up on, when Dwight Eisenhower talked about warning the American people of the expansion of the military industrial complex, I personally believe what he was saying was he'd witnessed all this industry get very wealthy off war from World War II. And I think that he understood that businesses exist to continue their revenues. And that as soon as all these people made this massive amount of money, they were going to make sure, lobby, do their best to make sure we stayed involved in conflicts. And I think that's been proven correct. World War II was the last time we had an Article, 1 declaration of war by Congress. And then we jump into Korea, Vietnam, a number of skirmishes from the Falklands, Grenada, whatever else, Desert Storm 1, Iraq, Afghanistan. At some point in time, it's when are we taking care of ourselves and when are we trying to be the world's police? And I think that's a fundamental question. And I love asking voters that is, what do you think the role of government is supposed to be? If you want it to be the world police of the world, well, then you're going to have to understand and accept the fact that it can't live within its means because we're only 350 million people out of 7 billion. So if you want to be the world's police, then that's not going to work. And we can't do that. And we, again, best is the enemy of good, right? Again, like you said, a best idea is, hey, the world's peaceful. We're going out there and we're stopping all the bad people out there that we think are bad, whatever else. But the good is that we need to take care of Americans and our veterans. And when, again, I live in Little Rock, Arkansas, any major city in the country, and not like Little Rock's a major city, but it's a major city in Arkansas. And, I drive through downtown and it's not a day goes by I don't see a homeless veteran. And not a day goes by. And I just find that to be morally offensive. And to me, it's really not a question of anything but taking care of our own at this point in time. We just have to, man.
Is there any better representation of how the government really feels about its people than the fact that we have so many homeless veterans?
Right.
I mean, it's disgusting.
Yeah. And this isn't equipment. This isn't like something we just didn't paint and let rust. These are human beings. And again, so Nate, how old are you? I'm 40. How old are you?
I'm 35.
35. Okay. So you're a little bit younger, but when the Twin Towers fell and that whole situation, we'd have probably a long off-air talk about that too. Again, trying to keep us out the algorithms here. There was this real national push. I mean, it was almost literally, I can still kind of feel what that felt like.
Dude, I had the paper, the newspapers printed the American flag on the back page. Everyone had those newspaper American flags up in the windows. I mean, we had them everywhere.
It was a never forget. I mean, there was this real sense of both unity, but also this push for kind of retribution. And there was a whole generation of young men who really felt that they were, being called to this sort of, very noble goal. And was it or was it not? That, again, I don't believe that it was. And I think most veterans you talk to will tell you that they don't believe it was. But then for them to do that and then come back again with scars seen, unseen, or not come back at all and be treated just like refuse. And then for our representatives to turn around and say, I know that you're broken, damaged, and you need some help. And we're the reason you're broken and damaged. But you know what? We can't do that because we're sending $100 billion to this war criminal across the ocean. Again, I just don't see how that cannot anger pretty much any American citizen.
Yeah, especially in the situation that we're even in as a country in our economy right now, the idea that we're sending billions of dollars over to another country. And I don't know if everyone realizes the fact that we are currently fighting a war against Russia. We're just using
Right.
other people wearing different uniforms to do it. And you think that they're not going to remember that for the rest of our lives? You know?
I mean, when I don't know what year it was, but I think it was in Poland or somewhere. We put in like rocket launchers. Like this is like 15 years ago, and they're capable of like normal rockets and also like nuclear weapons. And I remember thinking to myself, this is like the Cuban Missile Crisis just reversed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so how do we not understand how we're perceived? And maybe we do. Maybe Congress does understand how they're perceived. But I'm of the belief that infinite monetary printing and infinite war arise mutually. They need each other. And as long as there's kind of that sick symbiosis between a private central bank that can encumber debt upon generations, I think you're going to keep seeing this military industrial complex fomenting war across the globe. So it really, honestly, if you want to solve it, talk about the issues that are causing it, we got to tackle both of those simultaneously. And that's just my opinion.
Yeah, so you mentioned the money printing. Do you think that that's a way to stop the endless war? Because it's got to be paid for. They're going to have to print money to do that. And I guess with all the inflation we have going on, that's a good thing to kind of end on today. But what do we do about the monetary policy right now? Print more, right? I mean, people are having a hard time. We just print more money.
Yeah, well, I mean, so first off, we've used our military industrial complex to either export deflation or curb inflation. We've done that constantly with the boom and bust cycles. You can lay out a chart, of the American financial system, and then also lay out these things. And this is kind of what we're doing. We got kind of stuck in a bind in 2008 a little bit, and so we kind of had that first real awakening for the American people, where they go, "Wait a second, we're just going to start buying assets. Yeah, and we're just going to just write them off. There you go. And we're just going to hold them on our books." And again, it's not a simple answer. First, reforming the tax code, removing revenues from the federal government. And then, I think it starts with auditing the Federal Reserve. That's where it starts with first, is let's audit it. Let people know what's actually happening here. And again, waking people up to the fact that it's a private bank. And when you tell voters that, there's still people, you and I know this, people in the Libertarian Party know this. But I mean, 9 out of 10 people I meet, they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, dude, they're a private company, man. It's like a payday loan company for the government. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, it's not, there's nothing federal about it, man. There's Federal Express. And you get those wheels turning, because some of this is not about just the people occupying office. This is about occupying the hearts and minds of the American people and waking the public up to what's going on. And the moral hazard of having the ability to just encumber debt upon generations, because it creates no necessary means for Congress to act right. And you can see that because they're not acting right. If I have an infinite loan that I can always pull a line of credit from and I don't really have to be responsible for it, I have no incentive to make sure that my business works, I'm balancing my books or anything else, man. So again, can Michael White go in the Fed? I would love to, but that's not going to happen. Okay? Yeah. It's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take a lot of the public participation, honestly.
Yeah, this all changes when the public changes, when the hearts and minds change. These people are responding to incentives. The Fed printed the money, and that's what gives us inflation, but they printed the money because the government is going to spend the money. The government spends the money because the people tell the government that they want them to spend the money, but they don't want to be taxed. They want more money spent, but they don't want the tax. So the Fed, they come in, they print all this money. Well, also the Fed didn't make the decision to shut down the whole world's economy either. So and so this all changes when the people change, because these politicians, other than you, are all just out there trying to buy votes from people, and they're going to vote the way that the people that are going to keep them in office tell them to vote. And so ultimately, we can talk about getting the right people in there, but I mean, libertarians take over everything. If the populace isn't changed before that, they'll get impeached in the first month. They'll all be out of there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it took 250 years to get here in this republic. It's going to take time to unwind this. But, one thing that I love about libertarianism is the concept, not just of personal liberty, but personal responsibility. We get the government we deserve. And if people are not involved in that process, if they're not aware of what their government's actually doing, and they're just simply repeating whatever the talking picture box in their living room tells them, you're going to continue to get these same things. So you're right, you nailed it. There's really not one bad actor. The truth is, this is a bad aquarium. There's not bad fish. We have a bad system. We need a water change.
Okay, so coming up on time here, we already did the beard check. Beard's good. We know that. Yeah. So the last thing we got to do is just, you got to tell everyone what they could do to help you out and where they can go to do that.
All right. So again, my website is MW4Liberty, MW4Liberty.com. You can also find me on Facebook at MW for Liberty. You can find me on Twitter at MW for Liberty. Give me a follow, give me a like, whatever you got to do. Share my messaging. If you want to, throw a little donation to the campaign. We're coming up here on the end of this. We're spending a lot of money on, digital ads, things like that. So, $50, $100 helps out more than you could ever imagine. And I will tell people that I can't officially announce it because I don't have the ability to say so, but I intend on running perennially. So I intend on running again in this election and then again in 2024 and continue to build that namesake. So anything that you can do to help grow a following, help get my name out there, I really appreciate it, because it's not like the news organizations are falling over themselves to tell people about myself or limited government. So, yeah.
All right, Michael, thank you so much for your time today, man. That was a great talk, and come back on again sometime.
I would love to, Nate. Thanks for having me, man. Thank you so much.